Welcome everybody. This is Microsoft 365 platform community call. It is January 3rd. Happy New Year, everybody. Good to have some of the people back. Some people are still taking this week off as well, and we'll get more and more people on this calls for sure. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal product manager in the Microsoft 365 platform areas. We did intentionally run to Tuesday call and Thursday calls actually throughout the holiday season. And today we will have a casual call like we have done now 3 weeks in a row. We do not have any actual live demos on things. We'll go through some of the typical slides. We'll go through the latest news and announcements, but then we'll move in the questions and feedback and discussion. So super casual. If you have any questions which you want to get answered by Microsoft, you can add those questions already in. Unless I'm completely mistaken, David already shared already the URL in the chat where you can actually ask questions in an AMA style. We'll cover those questions in the later part of the call. For those, if there are any people who cannot access the chat, please let us know actually in social media if you have any issues on that, because we want to understand if there are any issues with that already. We are hearing some rumors on that, so just want to make sure that that's the case. We will share the URLs also in the screen, so you'll see them through that. Now, as a typical set of things, let's actually go through some of the basic URLs. So we do have 2 YouTube channels for Microsoft 365 topics, which we are planning to merge. So this one will start moving forward within January. So most likely you will see a 1 channel mentioned here. That's going to happen within upcoming weeks or within a month. Just to provide some clarity on where the videos are being published and which channel to subscribe, it's just easier to have one of them. Due to historical reasons, we ended up having 2, and we've been living on that for many, many years now. We do have a lot of open source assets available for you based on, so just development assets, also scripts assets, list formatting assets, and a lot of other stuff as well in multiple different GitHub organizations. But it might be, however, difficult to find what's relevant for you, so that's why we have a different set of sample galleries available, from which they came as M365 samples is the generic one, from where you can find samples for Power Platform, for Microsoft Teams, for list formatting, for SharePoint Framework, and much more. So everything from a one centralized location. And if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, luckily there's only one, which is M365 Community. And we do have also a lot of different community calls. This one is the Tuesday community call, which is happening every single Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time. Typically, we have Microsoft demos in this course presented by Microsoft product managers or Microsoft cloud advocates or developers. During this holiday season, however, we decided to do a more casual thing because a lot of the Microsoft employees have been also on vacation, well-deserved vacation, so we didn't want to actually book any demos in here. That's normal schedule. We'll get back on that one starting next week. So for next week, just a teaser, we'll talk about the Viva Home and Viva Connection extensibility. So we have cool demos and updated material on that. And then there's a demos and updated material related on Microsoft Craft PowerShell V2, which has a public preview available. So really cool demos coming up on 10th of January, so a week from now. On top of that, we have Microsoft Identity Platform, Office Add-ins, Power Platform monthly calls, and then we have the Thursday 7 a.m. Pacific time series, which is either Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community call or Viva Connection and SharePoint Framework community call. On the Thursday series, those are more for community to do community-based demos, so learning from the other people who are building experiences within Microsoft 365, and we do welcome community demos in this course. So, David, I'm putting you on a spot. Can you find the URL where people can sign up for the demos within the Thursday calls or other calls as well, because that's something what we're always looking for. People who would be looking into sharing their experiences within calls.
You got it.
Excellent. Thank you, David, on that. Now, as you might be wondering how to get started on Microsoft 365 development, and we do have you covered. So we have the Microsoft 365 Developer Program, which is a free program. You can sign up 1 tenant per a phone number, and you will get an E5 developer tenant, which will automatically renew as long as you use it for developer purposes. So basically, there are a certain level of inspection or instrumentation in place, which will detect that, oh, yes, you are actually a developer, because otherwise people would be using this to get a free free Microsoft 365 tenant, and that's not the intention in here. Regardless of some of the strange videos in YouTube, which are explaining this in a different way. Now, we do have also a lot of learning material available from Microsoft Learn, as a lot of Learn modules. I think we are in more than 100 modules and multiple learning paths. The latest one, which actually went live, I think yesterday, is around Viva Connection ACE development. We'll share more details on that one within upcoming days, and we'll start doing demos on that one within next Thursday. So really, really cool stuff available for you to take advantage. We do have two different developer podcasts available. So Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast hosted by Jeremy Thake and Paul Scheffelin together with Aisha Bass, and that's in m365devpodcast.com. And then we have the Microsoft 365 PnP Weekly, which is coming back next week, hosted by me and also Waldek Mastergaard, who's a Cloud Advocate within the Microsoft 365 Cloud Advocates team. That's coming off with a new episode starting next week. Now, we mentioned the sample gallery, the unified sample gallery. We do have now 1,440 samples available from this one centralized location, which is pretty mind-boggling. These samples are from Microsoft and from the community. So we really want to have this one inclusive location where anybody can go and you'll find the relevant sample for you, regardless if it's coming from the Microsoft or is it coming from the community. So we're trying to make it as easy for you as possible to find the relevant sample for you. So really, really cool way of accessing those. Now, then when you might be starting to use some of the samples you looking into contributing your sample, you might actually need some help. And I will let David Warner to talk about Sharing is Caring program.
Awesome. Thank you, Vesa. Yeah, friends, if you're new to the community and you see all these amazing initiatives and programs, things like all those plethora of samples, and you wonder where do they come from, it's from amazing contributors like yourself. But we understand that you may not know how to contribute those samples or other areas of contribution opportunities within the community. Sharing is Caring is a program that we have created that provides you hands-on guidance. And what that means is that we're going to work along side by side with you and showing you how to maybe submit your first pull request in GitHub if you do want to submit a sample, but you're not really quite sure how that landscape works. These are safe space opportunities, which means that they're not recorded, so you're free to ask any and all questions without fear of, hey, am I asking the wrong question? Should I already know the answer to this question? No, it's a safe space opportunity for us to work together and provide you hands-on opportunities and guidance how you can get more involved in the community. We've got sessions coming up this month now that we're in January of 2023, so don't hesitate to sign up. You'll see those invites coming out in the next day or two, and we look forward to working with all of you. It's absolutely free of charge, and we want to continue to support you and all the amazing things you're doing in the community. So you can check out the new sessions at aka.ms/sharingiscaring. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, David, on that one. Then on the weekly news, we have two typical series, or typical news coming from the teams and the SharePoint organization. So first of all, from the team side, we have the What's New in the December 2022 by Holly Lehman. And this is really covering the news related on the collaboration devices, platform and frontline workers, and governmental cloud support stuff within the Microsoft Teams. So really, really good summary on what has happened within the Microsoft Teams within the past month. Then on the second news on the Microsoft Teams blog platform was a feature focus with Microsoft MVPs with Stephen Rose. And Stephen Rose actually has a talk with Dan Ray and Carolina Kettukari around the Microsoft 365 dynamic groups and Viva insights from the team manager point of view. So really good discussions with the MVPs as well. And we're always looking into engaging with our MVPs for these kind of discussions. Notice I can actually say Carolina's last name in the right way. It's Kettukari. So not that many knows how to do that pronunciation properly. She's a Finn, so like I am. And then on the SharePoint Roadmap Pit Stop, December 2022 is from Mark Cashman. And that is not just about actually SharePoint. So that's covering a lot of the new stuff related to Microsoft Syntax, search video transcript for stream, how to do OneDrive sharing experiences, Microsoft Search updates, and all of that stuff as well. So even though the summary or the blog post name is SharePoint Roadmap Pitstop, SharePoint actually powers a lot of features and capabilities within Microsoft 365 under Microsoft Teams and Stream and Search and all of that stuff. So that's actually gathering all of those latest news right behind of that. Now, as we started the discussion today, we are in a special agenda still today. Starting next Tuesday, we'll get back on the ad hoc demos, well, not ad hoc demos, for a actual planned demos by the program managers and cloud advocates and our engineers. But it is 3rd of January, so this is the last week on our holiday break. We'll have a more in Q&A way of covering questions, doing live ad hoc discussions based on the input what you might have. And that means that you can ask questions in the chat, or you can ask questions in the AKMS M365 call questions, and we'll raise those questions in here. We'll do an ad hoc things on other stuff as well. So let's actually quickly start by doing this, and I'll get back on the already visible questions in a second. Just to give you an insight on that, 1 second, solution gallery. On our Microsoft 365 Unified Solution Gallery, as we can see, we have 1,441 total results. And the key point of this one is that we have a lot of new samples coming up from multiple different community contributors and also from Microsoft. So you can actually find the relevant samples from one centralized location. And then from here, you can actually get details around the individual sample, and then we link them within a GitHub. So rather than forcing you to go to individual GitHub repos and trying to find what's relevant for you, we're actually aggregating all of that information in a one centralized location, making it super easy for you to find what's relevant for you. And one thing what I wanted to call out from here, because I can see Casper in the call as well, the cool thing about this one is that it actually creates dynamically a GitHub-based profile for you. So you can actually see all of the contributors, for example, from Casper from one location and from anybody else. So, for example, Louisa Fries has contributed quite a lot of samples and more incoming. So we can see all of the individual samples, what she has done. So pretty cool location to find the relevant starting point for you for anything in Microsoft 365. Now, I mentioned Casper, and I can see him in the video as well. Maybe I should be actually putting my camera on as well, just for people to see me here. Casper had a question, does Microsoft 365 Dev Program also contains an Azure subscription with some free spending? And answer is unfortunately no for the free spending. So it does contain an Azure subscription or Azure Active Directory behind the scenes, but there is no free coverage on the Azure usage. So basically, free pieces of Azure. Of course, those are free and you can use them, but running VMs, Azure functions and everything like that, that does require a certain level of a payment. So unfortunately, no, that's not part of that. Now, I'm not quite up to date on what do we provide through the Microsoft developer programs for the MSDN nowadays. So I think there's an MVPs. If you're an MVP, you get something for free, and you get some if you subscribe to Azure programs, I guess you can get something free as well. So I would double check all of that. Not quite up to date on what's happening there. Now, any other questions? Anybody wants to talk about or have questions? David, are you?
Yeah, so I'm monitoring the monitoring the chat here. There was a little AKA mess up, so I fixed it and all is good to go. So we're getting some questions coming in on the. Now I see Hugo Bernier is lurking in the shadows. There's a question here that he may want to hop in on if he's in position. He's just coming back from vacation, so he may still be catching up. But one of the questions is, why are Power Pages so expensive? So it's a valid question. Licensing, we're getting the year started off right, I guess. Right? During an event recently, there was a great question of this posed to Sonia Singh, who is the vice president of Power Pages. And I think that, this is a much longer conversation than we probably have ability for. Let's change it to 1268. I think there was some weird oddity in the. There we go. There's some questions around this on an event recently that was asked, and I think that, again, it is probably too long to talk about for the entire time, but some of the points that were made, and we could always chat offline. I know Hugo would love to spend the entire hour talking about this, actually, but if it depends on a perspective for Power Pages, right? I think part of that is if you're just looking to use Power Pages to build a website, well, then that's definitely expensive. You can go to Azure, spin up a website, or for that matter, some other service and spin up a website that's very cheap. I think the intent and understanding is harnessing the power of Power Pages for what the ability is to provide you that secure data to external facing clients or partners or constituents or whatever the case may be in a way that is controllable and secured. So I think that Yeah, there's some expense to it, and like anything new that is created and released by Microsoft, there's always a better understanding that is going to happen through use, and refinement is always going to be done essentially as things get better understood, better used. The data allows us to make data-driven decisions that are not just willy-nilly and, hey, I think that this is a cool feature, let's charge an arm and a leg for it. But it's a better understanding of what the community needs and wants. Hugo is coincidentally in the cloud today, actually, so I think maybe he might want to chime in here. I see him showing.
I think you did a great job covering my talking points. The one thing that I would also suggest is that one of the things that Power Pages allows you to do is to extend your reach to your internal community, your employees, right? So if they're already licensed for the Power Apps, for example, within that license, you're actually able to let them connect to Power Pages. So you really want to make sure that you're covering your extra licensing for the people who are not already licensed and for your external users. And that's where, to David's point, that extends to your partners and constituents and customers and so on and so forth. But I'll reiterate the point that David made. Power Pages is not intended for you to just build a website. It's intended for you to extend the reach of your Power Platform to create a secure data-connected infrastructure, and that's the distinction here. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, that was good. That was really good. Now, before we go to the next question, I did mention this one, so I want to call that one out quickly. The latest version on the Microsoft 365 developer training modules is this one, which is great adaptive cards for Microsoft Viva Connection and, of course, for Viva Home. Viva Home is rolling out relatively soon worldwide. So this is a great 1 hour, 52 minutes module with multiple exercises to get started on learning how to get stuff done. I will paste in the URL on the chat, but as I'm doing that, I do realize that there's an interesting typo, so that might actually get fixed at some point by somebody. That's not how you spell SharePoint, but close enough. Anyway.
It's sharp though, so don't run with it. You don't want to.
True. At least it's not a capital P problem, so that seems to be driving people crazy. Now, coming back on the questions on the chat, as we're doing this ad hoc kind of question discussion this time, again, next Tuesday we'll get back on the normal live demos with PMs and developers and cloud advocates. But these question setups are really good as well. There's a question on how to properly reset a developer tenant. I tried to delete one, but old keeps on being renewed. I want to launch a trial syntax in dev, but can renew the same tenant at the point of promoting internally. So first of all, there was a questions related on some of this related things on the chat as well. So the syntax and the Viva modules, they are not part of the developer program. So in E5, and they're not part of that. So if you use Viva modules, which has a cost associated to them, then you would have to use the trials for testing them out within the developer tenant. Now, as an example, the Viva connection is a free, so that does not actually require any cost. There's no cost or anything associated to it. Same applies, by the way, for Viva Home, which is rolling out relatively soon as well. Now, this one is specifically on how would I properly reset the developer tenant. To be fair, the only way of doing this is by contacting the email addresses which the program provides from the registration URL. They can actually do that, especially in this case, if the old one keeps on getting renewed and you don't want to actually do that. That would be the only way to actually reset the situation. Anybody from this call, from Microsoft side, cannot actually help on any of this stuff, unfortunately. But if you go to the Microsoft 365 Developer Program dashboard, you register, sign in with the account which you use for signing into the program. There's a contact information there, and that should be the way of escalating that forward. Yes, watching the chat and the same one as well. Now, if starting out with ALM, should we go with Azure DevOps or GitHub? Will be used for Azure Functions, Power Apps, PowerShell scripts, etc. That's an interesting question. Anybody who wants to, from Microsoft side, wants to actually start speculating. This is one of those things that it depends.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say. Consulting answer: it depends.
It depends. So in Microsoft, a lot of our stuff has been traditionally in Azure DevOps, but more and more we see that the individual teams taking the GitHub into use, and gradually it seems like a trend to move a bit more on the GitHub side, but it really depends. It depends on the organization. It depends on the background information. It depends on skill set with the team, skill set of the people who are managing the ALM setup. ALM for Power Platform is always hard because Power Platform by default currently is still in a one tenant, so you cannot easily just export and deploy to another tenant. That's not something which you can easily do from an ALM perspective. Now, some of the new pipeline work will help some of these flows, but it's still not as easily doable. For example, like the SPFX SharePoint framework is like you can just take the solution, test it in one tenant, just drag and drop to another tenant, and it keeps on working because that's by design planned to work like that. But it really depends. There's no immediate preference, at least from our Microsoft side, on the Azure DevOps or GitHub. You will never get a explicit recommendation from Microsoft for that, for sure. So individual recommendation potentially, but both are products from Microsoft pipeline. So it's more on what is your preference. There is an ALM module for Center of Excellence for Power Platform, which talks about all of these things as well. But again, the Power Platform is, for now at least, still more designed to be done in a single environment rather than easily move the things to another tenant. Of course, there are plans and discussions and future roadmap items which might actually help there. Good. Can we access OneDrive sync reports via an API? Would like to notify users first level support when the sync error is reported. This is actually a really interesting question, but to be honest, at least personally, even though I'm technically from a OneDrive organization as well, I do not know if we cover this within the APIs. We do have those available for sure from a UX perspective, but I'm not sure if we have an API for that. And that would be something to actually start looking into. Sorry for that. Looking into more closely. Do we have anybody else on the Microsoft side on the call to answer from an API's perspective? Quickly looking, going once, going twice, going third. Nope, cannot confirm that. Nope, unfortunately. We cannot unfortunately answer on that one. Are we able to link solutions from app source to the sample solution gallery and how this differ? That's actually a really good question. That's an awesome question. So let's have a look on that. So first of all, if we go to the app source, and if we have the sample gallery in here, app source is all about offerings from ISVs for Microsoft 365 platform. Now, well, for Microsoft ecosystem. And one of the offerings, one of the targeting here, of course, is the products. So depending on a product which you are using or which you're targeting as an ISV, you can then select your product to be available, for example, in Microsoft Teams or in PowerPoint or in Outlook and so on. So this is basically a one centralized location to find individual offerings built by ISVs and partners on the partner ecosystem of Microsoft. And then depending on the product, these solutions are then exposed within the UX for you to take advantage. So as an example, let me actually quickly show this as well. Let me do that in here. And then let me do this one, quite a few tenants profiles. Let's use that one. And let's go actually in here and there. So as the product is then in the app source, as a partner is creating and packaging a solution and submitting that to the true partner center to be available by the customers, then depending on the product, the solution is also available within the product UX. So as an example, for Office and PowerPoint and Word and all of that, you actually get the offerings available directly from the ribbon, and then you can find what's relevant for you and you can install the solution to be available. In SharePoint, just an example on this, things look a bit different. So I can actually add an app. I can go from a SharePoint store, and again, whatever is available. Let me go. There we go. Clicking that one. Whatever is available in the app source is also exposed within the SharePoint store, or for example, in the Excel store as well. So basically, it is the same set of listing which is visible in here and what is visible in the app source. These are all partner offerings, and that's the key difference in here. The unified sample gallery, which is shown, is actually samples. So these are all samples provided for as a starting point, for example, for building your partner offerings, or for customers to take advantage, or for somebody to build something called birthdays per month experience, and then, or take the sample, evolve that, and then deploy that to their specific customer as a supported solution. So these are samples. They are starting points. They are not offerings by any specific partner. Now, in here in the app source, these are actually supported by the partner and offering for customers to be used and acquired within their tenant. So it's a bit of a different offering, a bit of a different setup of listings, and they do have a different objective as well. Now, something what is actually on the adaption.microsoft.com, however, so if we go into adaption.microsoft.com, which is really intended to be the location to find adaption information, so helping any business user, champion, developer, IT professional to get started on what is the Microsoft 365 platform, what is the Microsoft 365 offering. This is really, really cool website, and you can actually find also partner offerings from here. So there is a way for partners to get their solutions to be listed in here as a specific promotional offering. From here, as an example, let's do an example of something like, doesn't really matter what we actually do. Let's use Lightning Conductor. We can see that the Lightning Conductor is coming from the Lightning tools. They have 3 to 4 different offerings available, and this is basically not there to confuse anybody. It's just a listing on whose Lightning tools, their offerings, and then as you go to the individual solution as a customer, you can select that, hey, I want to learn more and I want to acquire this, and this will actually open up then to App Source, or it will redirect to the partner offering page, depending on a partner and how they choose to do things. So it's an alternative marketing location to promote your partner offerings if you have those, and that is a pretty cool way of actually getting stuff done. And there is a information in the partner center, in the adaption.microsoft.com for partner solution gallery on how to submit your solutions to be available in here. And let me paste in the link in the URL. And apparently I'm winning a patch. That's actually a really good joke on the chat. Thank you, Don. So. Cool. That's kind of trying to explain what's the difference between the app source and the sample solution gallery. These are samples provided without a support. Of course, somebody might actually pull down the sample and then start offering that to their customers and providing support to that sample as their offering, because a lot of the samples are provided as an MIT license, which means that they're basically provided as a starting point for people to take advantage. And that's the whole idea of sharing your knowledge and sharing that to others to take advantage as well. And App Source is all about partner offerings. So a bit of a different way of approaching things. Viva Home is a good question. So that has 2 votes, so that's why that's in the top there. I will actually, because I had a presentation open in here, I will explain what is Viva Home. So let me break that one and let me do this one in here. And for those who are joining a bit late today, we are on this ad hoc Q&A mode. Within this call, starting from next Tuesday, we'll go back on the normal schedule where we have actual planned demos, which are a bit more polished. Now we're doing a bit of an ad hoc things. Now, what is Microsoft Viva Home? So first of all, let me actually explain that from here. So Viva Home is a new offering coming from Microsoft starting from this year. It's starting to roll out in this quarter, which is basically the left side visible in here. So it's really taking the Viva connection mobile experiences and putting that in the similar experience, but in the desktop. So rather than having the Viva connection style of exposing things in the desktop, which is completely different looking than the mobile, we actually focus on the mobile first experience, and then you have the Viva Home from where you can actually access the Viva connection, but you can also access all of the other individual Viva modules. So rather than having 27 individual left side navigation items in the Teams, you'll have one location from where you can easily access all of the Viva modules which have been enabled within your tenant. So that's the Viva Home. The Viva Home was announced. Let me actually go back in here, and if I go to Viva blog, Viva Connection was announced in Ignite last year, because it is 2023. So in 2022, Ignite, I will paste in the chat in here, the link in the chat. We announced the Viva Home experience, which is visible here, and basically explaining the differences and explaining the extensibility model. Of course, if you have, for example, Viva Learning, Viva Topics enabled within your tenant, those will be surfaced as individual cards, out-of-the-box first-party experience cards within your Viva dashboard as an option, and then you can design your card experience as needed. Now, related on all of this, we also did provide additional details on the Viva connection. So where is it? I think it's in here. Was this the same one which I showed? No, it was the same one which I showed. Dun, dun, dun. Let's try to find where it is. Or maybe we didn't. Maybe I can't find it. Fine, I can't find it. That's okay. Anyway, so that's the location. The text is too small. It's okay. Absolutely, it's just small. Thank you for that reaction. But basically, the URL is on the chat. You can access the information from there. And the Viva Home is something which is going to be free, and it's rolling out worldwide for Microsoft 365 starting from this quarter. And together with the multi-home experience, multi-dashboard experiences, which are rolling into Viva, you can then start building different kind of experiences with the custom dashboards for your Viva modules. Now, I might try to do this as well. Let's see if I can actually find it still. I cannot promise that it actually works. In one of my profiles, I think we have things enabled. Yes, you can have multiple dashboards and multiple home sites for SharePoint, which means that you can have multiple dashboards which are then targeted based on the organizational settings. So here's a example of a Viva Home. I'm going to zoom in a bit. So basically within a test tenant, we have Viva Learning, Insights, Goal, and Engage licenses enabled. So that's why we can actually see those in here. I can access those also from the menu, so I can jump in directly to the specific Viva module based on my needs. I can access the dashboard experience, the desktop experience of the home site from here easily, and then I'm going to go back on the Viva Home experience here, and then the dashboard itself is surfaced natively within the Viva Home experience. And this is the same dashboard, which is of course then visible within the mobile experience. And that's really the frontline workers first, but then taking the desktop more aligned of that experience as well. And that's, by the way, why we are now creating more learning modules and extensibility guidance related on these ACs. And ACs are adapted card extensions, which you can actually build. So it's a new opportunity for customers and partners as an offerings in the Microsoft 365. And of course, those ACs can easily access Microsoft Graph and all of the information within the Microsoft 365, which is really, really cool. Good. I can say some comments. Custom code. So again, the custom code, what we can actually see within Viva Home, for example, in here, all of these you can actually build as an ACE extensibility and an experience, and that's what this module was all about, basically creating adaptive card extensions for Microsoft Viva Connection and including Viva Home starting pretty soon. So basically, how do we use SharePoint framework to create Microsoft Viva Connection extensibility? And yes, it's a super misleading name for a framework, which is SharePoint, but we actually built for Microsoft Viva, which is a bit of a confusing piece in here, but that's a terminology thing. Good. Adaptive card designer thing, package already reached some sort of a product quality. Did the adaptive card designer thing already some product quality can it be used as a third-party product, or when is a stable version planned? So this one is the adaptive card designer. Yes, so few things. Adaptive card designer is something what we are hosting in the adaptive card IO site. So this is basically the adaptive card website, adaptive card designer in here, and this one is reusable. Well, it's a good location to paste in, for example, ACE adaptive cards or your adaptive cards to make sure that they're working properly. So as an example, we'll do a quick demo on all of this stuff. Coming back on the Microsoft Viva experiences, if I go, oh, actually, let me go from here to here and then jump on, and I do understand that I'm jumping on multiple locations. I do apologize on that. But if we go to quick view samples and then we find a cool looking sample, like what would be a cool looking sample? That's my favorite. Here's a sample which is available for you to take into a use when you're creating your Microsoft Viva adaptive card experiences, but these can be actually opened in a designer as well. So this is basically the adaptive card designer experience, and now I can actually test out how it would be looking in Viva Connection. I can do the preview mode. That works really well, by the way, and it should be working really, really well. And I can test out the things in here. Now, this designer is actually also available for third party to use as a reusable control. It really depends, again, what are you building and how you are building things. But as an example, for SPFX, which you can use for Microsoft Teams and of Outlook and so on, you can actually take advantage of the adaptive card designer host, and that basically gives you exactly the same experience within a adaptive card designer. So you can then open up the designer directly within the UX, whatever the UX is, and you can actually take things to use within your custom experience, so which is pretty cool. And of course, you can use the designer also for designing your adaptive cards for Microsoft Teams and bots and all of that stuff. That's the whole intention of the adaptive card designer. Now, I will need to actually go and have a look on or report the issue. There's something strange related on this one. Why is it doing that? Why is it looking so bad? Maybe we'll worry about that one offline. Good. Is there a documented API to be able to push out OneDrive shortcuts to users instead of having them manually go to SharePoint library and click add the shortcut to OneDrive? Not sure. I don't think there's an API for that at this moment. We'll need to follow up on this. I will actually add a note for myself related on that. I know the feature. We can quickly have a look on the feature as well. The feature looks like this. It is relatively new feature, which pretty recently I wasn't actually aware until I then realized that it is. So if you are using SharePoint as a file storage, which probably you are, because if you're using Microsoft 365, your files are stored in SharePoint, even though you would be accessing the files through Microsoft Teams. But there's this feature called Add Shortcut to OneDrive, and this is actually pretty cool. So I can click that one. And it's adding one shortcut to the OneDrive, and then it's like, okay, so what does that mean? What does? Okay, it means that when you go to the OneDrive, you can actually see the link directly to that document library within the OneDrive in here. So as you actually access the OneDrive through, for example, the mobile devices or any device, you can actually go to the My Files, and in the default, you'll have a link directly to that document library. So this way, you can link directly the documents also in a SharePoint site to be easily available within your OneDrive, which is a pretty cool feature for sure. Good. We'll need to follow up on, is there an API to do that? That is a really good question. I'll follow up on that. Will the File Explorer evolve to show additional columns found in SharePoint libraries? A lot of SharePoint questions today. It's okay. Additional columns found in the SharePoint library. File Explorer. Are we looking into File Explorer in Windows or File Explorer in Teams? That's a good question. I don't know. Windows. Okay, Brian is saying Windows on the chat. So that's actually a pretty cool idea. Right now, I know that we're not supporting that for now. Let's see if I can actually show an example of that. Trying to figure out what can I actually show you that is not confidential. So basic idea is that if you would go to I guess this is fine. If you sync the files from the OneDrive for Business, you would be able to see additional columns in OneDrive in the OneDrive filter. So as an example, underneath my Microsoft location, I could then in the document library, which is now getting synced from SharePoint Online to be available in, thank you, Hagen, in my local computer, or at least visible in my local computer, I can then easily see the additional columns in here. That is a good question. Right now, I'm not aware that we're actually working on that one. But I'll double check that from OneDrive people. That's a good question on top of the additional the API for shortcut. So David already deleted the question, so I cannot copy that from here. You know, David, pointing on you. So
I can restore it just like magic. I just got to find it.
Can? Yeah.
I think that was
there we go. Excellent. Well, that's cool. So this is good. So really good question, actually. Can we get those columns to be visible in the OneDrive in Windows or in Outlook, in Apple as well? Good. Now we can actually close it. Thank you, David. Thank you for helping with this. Be looking a way to read SharePoint crawl log, but it seems like it requires a user. Any plans to having it using Graph? This is a good input for the Graph APIs, at least. So right now, I do know that I guess that you need to use, well, either a SharePoint APIs, which are not documented, or then you need to have a look on that using a UX. Not aware of any plans right now, but we will bypass that input also for the SharePoint team, who's responsible of the Microsoft Graph API and the future on that. So really, really cool stuff as well. I'm seeing Joshua asking what's the recommended recommendation for when to use add a OneDrive versus sync in the SharePoint library. So that comes back on, that's on the chat. So coming back on this model where we synced the libraries, add OneDrive to my, the library to my OneDrive rather than syncing the SharePoint library. So now if you sync the how would I say this? Even though this is now in my OneDrive, it is actually the files are still within, and they're visible only in my OneDrive. When I click here, I'm seeing files directly from a SharePoint site. So if I would want to have the SharePoint sites files locally available for me in an offline mode, I would actually, when I click a sync here, it will sync the document library from a SharePoint site. So it's not a decision when to use which. It's more on the fact that if people are more familiar and more prefer to use the OneDrive access points for all of the files, they can easily have the document libraries and the relevant document for them from a SharePoint library is also visible within this view. So it's not either or, it's actually both of them, alternative things. So like Jim is saying, actually on the chat, it is just a shortcut. So that's the thing. It's a link. It's a shortcut for me to even more easily access the comms site, document library in the comms site. That's what it is, actually. Good. Do you have any idea, best guesses on what's going on happen to stream this year? Curious on what to know where the migrate content, whether the migrate content in the new stream, but it doesn't have many new features yet. So the direction is the new stream for sure. There are some features which we used to have within the classic stream, which are not yet in the new stream. The key advantages of the new stream is that the individual files and everything else are actually stored in the OneDrive SharePoint storage, and that means that they're under the same compliancy security boundaries inside of your tenant. And that's really the direction where we're heading. More and more those features which are lacking, you will see them gradually getting addressed, and you will see even more features in the new stream. So it's a matter of timing. When do you actually do the flip to the new stream? Because eventually there will not be old and a new. There will be only the new one. So more and more new features in the new stream. That is the direction on that. Good. Given the introduction of cards in the Power Apps based on adaptive card, is there extensibility possibility between Viva ACs and Power Cards created in Power Apps Power Platform as no-code solution alternative to SPFX? This is really, really good question. I remember, should I actually be saying this? I guess it doesn't matter. Even Jeff Teeper actually asked this from us in the Power Platform conference where this one was announced. So the Power Cards. So basically, hey, so is SPFX team looking into doing this with the Power Cards? And there is an ongoing, let's say, look on things. There's an ongoing possibilities and looking into options to be available. Most likely what you will first see that there will be a no-code options to create Viva Ace cards with the Viva Ace designer with a deployment options in a tenant level. And then at some point, you might actually want to start seeing combinations of these things at some point. But again, one step at a time, not immediately in the roadmap, but there's an ongoing discussion that this might happen. Now, something what I did say there, which might actually open up or cause questions, is that even when we go here, and when I go to my dashboard for Viva, I can go in here, and I can add a designer card. Let's do desktop, and I can assign designer. There we go. Card designer is something which gives you the option of having no-code cards. These are basically cards which do not require you to use SPFX or deployment options and centrally deploy things. Now, the card there are ongoing discussions that potentially at some point the card designers will extend to be supported on some level of an API connectivity. So you're able to actually use this to build no-code cards. And then the option for the content creators and card designers to say, hey, I want to have this available within my tenant. So you're going to actually start the process of adding administrator to know that, hey, here's a card, and now it's waiting for administrator to see and review that. Will it be then available across the tenant for everybody to use? So that's a shorter term, most likely than the Power Platform cards. The main reason here is that anything which is cross-organizational gets really complicated inside of Microsoft. And we, as a Microsoft, we are pretty, to be honest, bad with that cross-organizational things, because then there's the cross-organizational dependencies, and then those dependencies can delay or slow down other organizations' innovation. And that's why we try to avoid cross-organizational things quite often. Will we have Power Cards driven ACE cards at some point? I would not be surprised if that happens, but no ETA at this point. Good. Somebody, what was it? In ESBC, Paolo in the intro said that I'm the most talkative introvert probably in the world. I've been talking for 50 minutes. Now, anyway, it's just an act. It's 10 years of consulting in Microsoft Consulting. does the trick. Any plans on increasing document size or how many pages can be read for a document processing in AI models? Interesting. Certainly, the sizes and all of those limitations, for example, the number of pages and the document sizes and all of those, all the time Microsoft is looking into increasing those. So those sort of removing limitations. Also, because more in the size of the documents and size of the actual size of the storage of the document sizes is growing all the time. So we need to keep on supporting bigger and bigger things. Probably in the past years, you've seen we are adding more and more features and capabilities which are available, more and more storage options and larger files. I think we support 100 gigabyte files already in OneDrive, for example. So the same thing will certainly happen in the AI models as well. So all of those limits will get better and better. And Teresa, yes, unfortunately, the M365 PnP, that's actually my developer tenant. So that's why I just use that one. So it's and how did we get a developer tenant? You go and say Microsoft 365 developer tenant, and you sign up for the Microsoft 365 program. And there we go. How do we just, there we go. No, that was hard. Maybe we used the wrong search engine. Just kidding. Microsoft 365 Developer Program. Okay. Be sure that that's the easiest way to find it. There we go. Now we can actually find it. So from here, that's the developer program. David actually already pasted in the link because he's much faster than I am. Signing here, you can get your free E5 tenant. There is actually example content within these tenants as well. So as an example, the stuff what you see in my welcome page is example content. Some of it has been generated by default, and some of this can be actually easily then generated from lookbook.microsoft.com. Which is a really, really easy way of giving you a starting point, especially in the sample tenants. So as an example, in my case, I think I provisioned the Viva structure using the landing, and then I just added or enabled the Viva connection features on it. And that basically gives me the example discussion points. Yes, I'm actually, this is just an artificial intelligence. It's a hollow picture. I'm not real, so you can't prove me on that. So thanks for the question, Robert. Good. Any other questions? We are a bit of running out of time. Any plans to increase document size? Yeah, that one we already covered on AI models. I'm just switching in on the chat. We still have 6 minutes if we want to do any ad hoc things. Questions. What's the one question you always want to ask from Microsoft? We might not be able to answer that, but. Oh, Rob has a hand up. Rob, good to have you on the call.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Your first working day, and you're immediately on this call. That's pretty cool. So. Anyway.
Yeah, it's going back to one of the first questions you answered. Just might have been a little confusion around Power Platform and ALM. At the very end of your answer, you said it's all meant to be done in a single environment. And I'm pretty sure in the context you were talking about, you meant it's all meant to be done in a single tenant. Yeah. Because when you say environment, that has specific meaning when it comes to Power Platform and ALM. So yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Really good point. Absolutely. So making sure that we don't over guide you in the wrong way. So really, really cool. So thank you for that. Good. What's the future of SharePoint subsites? Oh, that's a good question from Jeff. We are just about running out of time, and I'm heading to a tunnel. Sorry. Now, how would I put this in a nice way? So the question is on what is the future of subsites. So the subsites in the past was a way of building unfortunately too large site collections quite often. And if a site collection have multiple thousands of sites potentially, which technically is possible, it will start having a performance impact within the tenant and performance impact for end users. And that's not an optimal thing. And that's one of the reasons why we introduced this hub sites. Hub sites is a collection of site collections. So in the future, we are more and more heading to a direction where one site collection is considered as a site. So the future related on the sub-sites is that we are not looking into significantly, at least investing on them. We do not have any timeline or public information about any deprecation plans or removal of them at this time, but will that happen at some point? Maybe, maybe not. It's not an area where we are significantly investing. So for the future, the thinking is more on that we would never actually create a sub-sites within a site collection. We would rather create individual sites which are then associated together with a hub site. And that's a much more future-proven model of building the structure. And you actually see that if you create a sub-sites in many of the modern experiences, it's outdated, it's not up to date, there's not a super polished experience. And when I move to the sub-site, for example, in here, let's call it as a sub-site 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's create a sub-site in there. It does not necessarily even inherit a lot of the settings from the above site. So there are kind of a directions where we're heading with this. You can now see that I'm in a sub-site, but I do not have the navigation from the higher level, which is a bit of a change if you are an old school, not an old school, that's the wrong way of saying that. If you've been working with SharePoint from a past with the classic experiences, things were working indeed differently. But the future direction is more on individual site collections. Good. Thank you, Graham, for that comment. That's a good comment from Babla. None of this, nothing is black and white. So these are basically areas where we are investing, and for now, everything is working as planned. If we would be, so one thing which we talked about actually last week in the ad hoc discussions as well, and the week before, if in any point of a time we would start chopping some of the features in the, for example, classic experiences in SharePoint Online. Will classic experiences in SharePoint Online exist in 2052? Probably not, because sooner or later we will need to leave something behind. So at some point between now and 2053, this is not an official, by the way, timeline, we will say that we will no longer support classic experiences. When then we will do that, we will give you enough time to react on those changes. And that's something what we are really, really careful on Microsoft. So we would never come and say, starting tomorrow, you can no longer do boom. We would communicate early on, and we would say 12 months or whatever time advance that there was going to be a change. You should not be doing this. You should be doing something else. And then we'll enforce those limits or the adjustments as needed. So we're really trying to be forward thinking and as much of providing as much transparency as possible. So not causing intentional breakage of things. Thank you, Casper, on that comment. Anyway, so we are running a bit of out of time. I guess it's time to close up. And we did actually got that on even recorded on my answer. So hopefully nobody will take that in the wrong way. But thank you for this one. And like I said, we had a special dates from 20th, 27th, and 3rd of January, which were more this ad hoc things. So ad hoc demos, trying to help you answering some of the questions. Starting from next week, we will have back on the normal Tuesday call experiences. We will at least have 2 demos, Microsoft Viva Home, Viva Connection development experiences, and we'll talk about the Viva Home and the timelines potentially there as well. And then there's going to be Microsoft Graph PowerShell V2 preview and with the live demos as well. So those are the 2 confirmed demos for next week on January 10th. But other than that, we'll get back on the line. Good to have you back. Have a happy new year. 2023 hopefully will be a great one for everybody in this call. But thanks, everybody. If we missed any of the questions, feel free to ask them. We'll try to answer the questions still in the chat, but for a while, or use the AMA tool. But I cannot promise to answering all of them. But thanks everybody, and good to have you back on the call. We'll get the recording out within 24 hours, like in the past, and getting back on the normal timelines. Thanks everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.